about Pipkins with the people who made the programme. There's Nigel and Heather.
And asking the questions, Hartley Hare. Excuse me. Nigel and Heather, welcome to my chat show. So, we're here today to talk about that wonderful programme, Pipkins, and of course to talk about me. Now, let's start by thinking back to the days before Pipkins. It must have been very dreary without me around to liven things up. Now, tell us what children's programmes were like back then.
There was very little daytime television. In fact, I think it was right about the beginnings of daytime television on ITV. And there'd been some children's programming on BBC, but very, very little on ITV as far as I can remember, and nothing for the sort of market we were looking at, which is preschool children. The IBA, who were running the independent television network, wanted to have an English, not exactly an English version of Sesame Street, but we wanted a programme for the same audience, which was a preschool audience. And ATV, Yorkshire Television, Granada and Thames Television, they were the four main broadcasting companies around the country in that time. They each got a commission to do a programme to fill the same slot, which was 12:10 on a weekday. And we came into it to fill that gap.
Stick 'em up, Hartley.
I beg your pardon?
I said stick 'em up.
Stick 'em up. Stick what up?
Your hands. I said stick 'em up.
Don't be ridiculous. I'm not sticking my hands up for you or anybody else.
Nigel and I were both at drama school together, and Nigel was in the year above me. And in those days, when you left drama school, in order to get an equity card, you had to be a member of Equity, but you couldn't be a member of Equity unless you had a job. And my very first job when leaving drama school was 2 weeks with the Playboard Puppets. And these were the people that then went on to create Button Moon. So I worked with them and got my Equity card. And it was at that point Nigel had got Pipkins and was looking for somebody to do the other voices. I originally did Topov, Tortoise, which obviously I didn't have a deep enough voice for. And I did Octavia, which was a string puppet, which I had never done strings, well, let alone I've never done real puppetry before. So consequently, that's why she bounces around a lot and hardly touches the ground.
Then, Heather, there was the pig, with his broad black country accent.
And why one so bad as I actually did. But it just happened. It was one of those things. And in a way, I think the pink foam took over.
Ah! Pig, don't do anything silly. Don't do anything you might regret.
Oh, stick up your hands.
Yes, I was just about to. So, Nigel, I seem to remember you acting as my voice coach. Maybe you can explain how you helped me to acquire my charming and distinctive way of speaking.
I think I pulled the voice from thin air. I can't think that I based it on anyone or anything. It's so strange, isn't it? I mean, you know, that silly little voice. It's such a strange voice that I can't think I based it on anyone. I just think I looked at the description of the character and there came the voice.
And you know, you can do all sorts of things with a glove puppet. You can put it on your hand and you can play with it. You know, you can be naughty with a glove puppet. Can't you, Michael?
We used to shoot 2 programmes a week. So there were 2 15-minute programmes a week. And we had 3 days rehearsal, probably half a day of which I think, and my memory serves me, was taken up with voice recording, because I used to do the narration for the show as well. So probably the first half day was taken up with me in the voice studio doing that. Then on the afternoon of that day and the following 2 days we rehearsed.
Actually, when I look back over it now, it was amazing that we had the amount of rehearsal that we did, because what normally happens as an actress now, if you turn up the bill, Casualty, any of the normal sort of run-of-the-mill programmes, you have no rehearsal. You actually have learnt your lines, you rehearse, record on set. So thinking back, when you actually had rehearsal in those days, I mean, that was a real luxury, because it doesn't happen on big shows now.
And then the following day, the fourth day, we would be in the studio all day, long day, probably, I think it was 9 o'clock till 7, I think, or something like that, 9 till 8. And we would record 2 programmes, stop-start recording. We didn't have to edit in the camera as some of the other programmes had to. I have to say that Lou Grade was very generous with us at this point, because he allowed us to have as much editing time as we, well, I wouldn't say as we needed, but we certainly had editing time, which other programmes didn't have, I know. And also he gave us a budget to film outside, which meant that we could go off and go to the countryside or go to the seaside, or all these things that I think the others found quite restricting.
The idea of being on location was always great fun, but the reality of it was a nightmare.
We were always lying around on the floor somewhere, or being dragged along on a trolley or something like that, so it was always a tough thing doing location work on Pipkins.
You weren't protected in any way, and if you're up a tree you actually had to be on a ladder, you know, balanced, and it was actually quite unpleasant really. But it was good fun because you thought, oh God, we're filming.
Like all celebrities, we had our fair share of makeovers on Pipkins. Some of us needed them more than others, of course. Now, let's talk a little about how we were improved during the series.
Pig had to change, really. I mean, he changed from week to week because bits would drop off of him. I mean, there were some times when I was performing and my hand would come out of his throat. And I mean, that's why he had a scarf, in order to kind of keep tightening it up. Because it was, I mean, you never knew what was going to drop off, really.
Oh!
Every so often the puppets had to be changed because they would wear out. I went through 3 Hartleys during the course of the series, and although the base of the puppet was the same, it would come back completely recovered. And Jane, who made the puppets, did come back with some very interesting varieties of pig, for example. And gradually we standardised on a pig, but inevitably they just wore out, you know, because we were making the show for 9 years, you know, and they were getting really hammered through that time.
He got me!
They were always made to look rather tatty. That was supposed to be the feel of the show. It was supposed to be not pristine. It was supposed to be somebody's old jumper being made into a puppet, or a bath sponge in the case of Pig was being made into a puppet. Or it was all supposed to be things that were used, so they shouldn't look pristine and you know, perfect.
On a sad note, dear old Mr. Pipkin passed away while we were making the series.
When we started doing the programme, it was called Inigo Pipkin, and George Woodbridge was playing the lead character of Inigo Pipkin. Now, he was quite an elderly character actor who had been around many years doing swashbuckling and hammer horrors and all those sort of things.
You just knew his face from everything, and he was a really, really lovely man. And I remember, you know, his snuff taking and liked to flutter on the horses, and he was just, you know, really encouraging and really warm.
Sadly, he died after we'd made about 6 programmes of the second series, and he had already recorded the last programme of that series. So for the whole of the second series, we were saying, Mr. Pipkin's gone fishing, or he's gone out, and because we hadn't really got any kind of idea what we were going to do. Most of the episodes had been written for that series at that time, and certainly, as I said, the last one had. So we had to deal with it. We had to find some way of dealing with it. And when we came to do the third series, and the name had changed to Pipkins, it was decided that we would tell the children that he died, because most children go through the experience of losing a grandparent or some such thing. It was quite a controversial decision at the time, because as far as we were aware, nobody had ever approached the subject of death on preschool children's television. It just wasn't a topic that you discussed. We got a mixed response. Most of it was positive. We only actually got one letter saying that the child in question had been distressed, and we suspected it was probably more the parent that was distressed than the child.
Well, we had a lot of music in the programme, and I am, of course, a naturally gifted vocalist. But remind me, who decided what songs we should sing and when?
Chris Hazel wrote all the music for the show, all the music in the bulk of the show. He didn't write the opening credits, the opening titles and the closing credits on the earlier shows, but from about the time when it became Pipkins, or not long after, his music was across the whole show, and he had a very particular style. The choice of songs for each show came from the writers, really. They would have a songbook which had all the songs in it. they could adapt the lyrics as to suit their own purposes, which they often did. And we just had a whole series of backing tracks, which we used and would sing as appropriate for each show.
When you're with your friends and you can't decide what to do, 'cause you all want to do your own thing. Maybe fly a kite or to ride a bike.
Stay inside by the fire.
Maybe just sing.
The musical aspect of Pipkins I'll never forget, because in the very early days, when we first started, we had a full orchestra, which was absolutely terrifying because it was like Jack Parnell and his orchestra, and they were all kind of... And I just, was completely green. And I remember sort of starting, and I just couldn't get on, because I was doing Topov at that time, and it was... I am a monkey called Topov, or something, the note, and I couldn't get it. So the orchestra would keep starting up and then stopping because I would be wrong. And I think it was sort of after that time they realised it was a rather expensive way of going around it if you hadn't got proper singers.
Going to the park. Really glad. Can't wait to start.
So, tell me, Heather, I hear the pig could be quite difficult to work with.
The problems with pig was that in those days you didn't have any rods. And I saw an episode back the other day, which I think might be on the DVD, which is actually just atrocious. For some reason, the trotter is just stuck in the air because you couldn't do anything with those arms. They were just kind of stuck. Whereas nowadays, it's far more refined, that you can bend things and use the trotters, but there was nothing. You just had to bend these things into shape, and nothing moved. And in order to kind of get any kind of character, you had to kind of pull at it. So consequently, that's why the mouth was torn. Generally, there wasn't a lot of movement within the puppet that you were given, but you tried.
The difficulty of using them in the situation we were in was that we were, for the first 5 years, we were working on a flat studio floor. So we would always be sitting down under a table or under a bench or behind something, and so we couldn't move anywhere. And then in around about 1975, the Muppet Show took up residence in the studio right next door to us, and they started shooting the Muppet Show. And the Muppet Show was all shot up in the air, so all the sets were built up by about 4 foot in the grounds of the sets. And the producer from our show, Mike Jeans, went in at some point and saw this, and saw the freedom it gave the puppets to move around, and petitioned to have a new set built.
I've been told I'm something of a cult figure. Were you aware of this at the time?
I had no idea at the time. I was doing a job, as far as I was concerned. It's only in later years now, talking to people who were in the original audience, that you understand how big an impact it made, And I certainly, it impresses me now to know what an impact we were making on those children.
If I may be so bold as to ask one final question, which was your favourite Pipkins character?
Well, there was Pig, there was Tortoise, Topov, Octavia, Mooney. But of course there was only really one star of the show. That was you, Hartley.
Why, thank you. That's very nice of you to say so. You can have my autograph afterwards. I think we should cut there, don't you? Yes. Michael Parkinson, eat your heart out.
Oh, make me leader, and we'll fly our kite 3 times a week.
For many years, I never spoke to anybody that I'd anything to do with Pipkins. But I have to say, in the last few years, I've come out of the closet, and I now admit to being part of Pipkins.
What about our pocket money?
Pocket money? What pocket money?
I think the character of Hartley really is what everybody would like to be, or probably how everybody is as a child.
Oh dear, we really are in trouble now, aren't we, Michael?